In part one, I went over what we allow users to bring in terms of data, which is pretty much anything, right? And the reality is that like firms are consuming more data than ever before, but the human capacity to be able to process that data has stayed roughly the same, right? Like let's say you want to compare like two earnings transcript, like your first thought is maybe to summarize one, then summarize the other, and then maybe it's try to understand the difference. And it takes a long time. It turns out that large language models are pretty good at this type of tasks, not just between two earnings, but two data sets, three, four data sets, and between data that is structured and unstructured at the same time. And the models are getting better every day, and the cost is going lower. And so we started building a product not on where we are today, but where we think we're going to be in a couple of years. And we started thinking that, look, RAG is great. So basically being able to get access to an embedding where it mentions something, providing into the large language model and getting the output is great. But ultimately, as a user that is doing like research or due diligence on a company or anything else, you don't want to just have access to that information and then leave it at that. You want to bring it back into the dashboard, or you want to interact with it like later on. So you want to refeed it back into the data of the product. And so we really started thinking about, okay, what is the future going to be in terms of investment research when it comes with a Copilot? And so we came up with the OpenBB Copilot, which is basically an agent that sits on the side of the dashboard that has access to all of the data on the dashboard, but also all of the data that you have on the backend. And so you will be able to extract insights and patterns on versus all of the data that you brought in. And once he outputs that response, whether it's like markdown text, whether it's a table, in the future we're going to add code interpreter as well, so you will be able to do calculations between different data sets. All of that data, like images, output, will be able to be refed into the dashboard of the product. And so an example I want to share is this one. I'm going to select this text and I'm going to force the Copilot to look into the content of this PDF in this case. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this list of questions. It tells me what is happening. It tells me that he's querying user files. In this case, he knows that he's looking at that one. I can also hide the left bar so we have more space. Here we go. It tells me the initial conversion rate, it tells me the conditions for conversion, it tells me the coupon rate and frequency of payments, it tells me the forced conversion conditions, and it tells me the QSIP, which is exactly what I was looking for. And then it tells me the citation. And in our next iteration, actually, we allow the users to click on the citation, and it tells you straight where it is on the PDF. And that allows you to not just trust, but verify, right? And so it allows you to check whether these values exist, but it still saves you a lot of time, even if you just need to do the verification, particularly when you can just click and it goes to the page where that is mentioned. And so that's on our next series that's going to happen. But now what was I saying earlier, and I want to show you, is that you will be able to create a widget coming from this data. And so when you click create, now it becomes available here, and we can add the Copilot, and now it becomes available here. And so you can reutilize it onto the Copilot, or you can have someone from the team now being able to leverage it. And because this is our text widget, note widget, you will be able to do changes on it because it is a markdown at the end of the day. So I'll be able to do something like hello. Let's say that you are following a few companies, like 20 or wherever. You can create a watch list of the tickers that you are following, and you can group with an earnings transcript as per the example that I just mentioned. And then basically what that means is that you can click on the company that you want to have more information, Apple or Nvidia, and then the earnings gets updated immediately. And so what that allows you to do is to have a list of earnings questions that you want to always ask to this group of companies whenever the earnings transcript comes out. And so in this, if you were to use another RAG system, you'd have to, upload document or extract this report from the SEC filings. In our case, it's as simple as I'm going to add this NVIDIA earnings transcript as a context of Copilot. I'm going to add the earnings questions, and I'm going to say answer all these earnings questions using earnings transcript from NVIDIA. And you will be able to analyze all of the data from the earnings, and then basically create the output based on these questions. And so you see things like create a table with column with financial metrics, sentence in the earnings where it was extracted, and then I ask it to double check the information to make sure that it's accurate, and then you can see what is the guidance. And you can see here that he responds to the guidance questions, but it also creates a table for me. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the capabilities of our product is that table can be refed into the dashboard. And so now I could create a table from it that becomes accessible here on the terminal, and I can auto size all columns, for instance. And then of course, if I wanted to have access to this data on something like Excel, it's just simple as just clicking to clipboard and then pasting it. As I mentioned, our OpenBB Copilot is not just a ChatGPT wrapper. There's a lot of workflows that have been really optimized to improve the life of the users. And so I'm going to show a few of them. So let's say that you go to the investor relations page on NVIDIA and you have access to a link that talks about their last earnings. You could do something like what are the highlights from, and then paste the link. And in this case, you can even create a widget from it directly using our iframe widget, which is super nice. But basically what happens is as soon as I press enter, the large language model has access to data within this page. And so you can highlight that. And now let's say that you don't want to have this iframe or you want to add your own notes. You could go back into the process that I've shared in the past where you can create this as a widget. But let's say that in this case, this happened in August 28th. And what happened was that they beat expectations, but still the stock price declined on the day. So one thing you can do is to use this @web concept. And what it does is it basically utilizes the Perplexity API under the hood. And so that means that basically it has access to the internet and has access to the news on the day and has access to all of the data that Perplexity has access to, which is great because then the user doesn't really need to have this data available, right? And then finally, another thing that you can do then is basically leveraging data that you don't have access here, but is available on the backend. And so you can do something like this. Utilizing only analysts that updated their price target after last Wednesday, let's do after 28 August 2024. Create a table that contains date of revision, name analyst firm, okay. And now what we expect is that it will grab data from the backend. Here we go. And so now we have all of this data that is being utilized of people that updated their price targets for NVIDIA after the date of August 28th. And you can see, you know, the context, you can see the query that has been run, and you can even add the widget that has that data, so you can compare against the data that it says here, in this case NVIDIA, and you can look if the values are correct, which is super helpful for users and allows you to, you know, validate the data, but also allows you to have access to the data much faster if you just want to have access to it quickly. But so you've got the option, you know. What I'm going to attempt here is something that is much harder, just from the nature of what it is. Basically, I'm going to use this prompt. What it does is it goes onto the backend and it goes grab the stock price of Apple on terms of like a day by day. It computes the average on a monthly basis per day, per month, sorry, and then it uses data from that is on the dashboard with the price target by analyst and computes the average of that data. And so you can see that right now the interface is not the best right now because this was like our first iteration, and you can see that is overly communicative. It's basically telling you everything that is happening under the hood, and there's a lot of steps to make sure that this works, but it's really promising, and this is without coding interpreter yet. So once we start unlocking the code interpreter, the capabilities of the Copilot are going to be really enhanced, and that is due to our entire architecture around the widgets and around the metadata, and it really shows the promise of what we're building, and that we are building a Copilot that's truly agentic and can come into the workflow, take the widget that is necessary in order to use that data to do like a correlation or create a table that can compare the two. Because now what I could do simply is create a widget from a table, for instance. And then let's say that you want to create a chart with this data. We can do like a line chart. That's something that is possible. And so you can see the door of opportunities for users. Once the models get better or agentic workflows get better, we can iterate more with metadata. Users have more data, and basically the data that they create from the Copilot goes back into the dashboard and can be reutilized at a later stage, or from a colleague that has access to that shared dashboard or to the same backend. And so that's kind of the direction towards the one we're building. Now, I showed quite a few things around AI that are possible within the Terminal Pro. The main one is the OpenBB Copilot. In this case, we are leveraging mostly OpenAI, but we've also used like Anthropic where it makes sense, and we use whatever model is best for the task at hand. So if there's an image being uploaded into the chat, we may use like a model from Anthropic. If there's something that involves reasoning, it may be OpenAI. If there is something that involves for us to have like a bigger context, maybe we use something from Google, Gemini. And so we always want OpenBB Copilot to be the best in breadth in terms of like the specific workflow from users. Now, having said that, we understand that some users don't want their data to be pushed onto OpenAI, even if it's given as a context, right? And so we create the same concept of bring your own data. We created the same concept of bring your own Copilot. And it basically means that, look, if you don't want to use OpenAI or Anthropic, you should be on your rights to not do so. And so the way we handle that is we allow users to bring their own Copilot. And so you can click here, you can say, let's say I want to add my own Copilot, and you can even click here where you see the example of Copilots that we have integrated that users can use as a reference. And in this case, I already have to incorporate it here. I'm gonna go into the Mistral here, which I'm running locally, so it should be this code here. So it's called Mistral Example Copilot. I called it AI-powered financial Copilot that uses Mistral large as its LLM. There's a thumbnail for it. I say which properties I want to give it. So this Copilot.json file is what specifies the specs that Pro understands based on the endpoint that is given. And I say that there's streaming, there's function calling that is allowed, so it has access to data that is available on the product. And does it support documents? In this case, it doesn't support documents. And this is the query. I'm running it locally, and now basically that means that I can say something like hello. And this will hit my endpoint locally, which in this case is pushing it to Mixtral. But let's imagine that you are running a llama tree from Meta locally, or you have a model that is much smaller, fine-tuned, and you want to use it. You have built something that has RAG internally with some internal documents. You can integrate any of those copilots into OpenBB and just use OpenBB as the interface to communicate with that copilot. Because wherever the data is, then you can create a widget back from it that becomes accessible here, which then you can refeed into the product if you want, So that's why we built this architecture, is to make sure that the data, there wouldn't be no leakage. And so then there was an issue, which is like we built a few workflows to make the life of users easier. And so things like, let's say we go back into this Copilot, things like the chat name. If you start chatting with the Copilot, it will update the name based on the content. So for instance, if I say hello, it should say something like greetings or financial inquiries. If I go on to like the rename of the dashboard, I can click here, which basically I'm gonna have like a suggestion based on the content on the dashboard. And also when I upload the document, and I did that earlier, but let's do that here now. I'm gonna update this one. Actually, I have a management team widget CSV. I'm gonna upload it. The name didn't exist, and it tells me management team compensation overview, and I have metadata, and I create it, and now it becomes accessible here. But all of these uses AI workflows that we make so that users have a better experience when using the product. But because of the same concept of like some firms do not want their data to leave their servers or go into third party. So we enable them to turn that off. So you can go into here general, and you can disable these enable AI powered features, and you can even over on top top of here to see which ones we're talking about. And once that happens, that basically then means that you don't have none of the AI features being worked on. So for instance, right now here, I'm going to create a new shot. And if I say hello, it should remain new shot because the feature is turned off. So no data leaves out. And then in terms of data storage, which I mentioned earlier, we don't store any data apart from if there are static files, because we need to store them somewhere so that we can enable sharing, so that we can enable Copilot to have access to the documents, and so we can enable you to log out and log in different machines and still have access to it. But if you have like an S3 and you want to host your documents and static files locally, we can work with you to make that happen.